outside of the model of the different model of security and transparency that we already talked about, I think one very interesting thing that we do differently is how we approach the trading experience on Cube. And for us, that's trying to synthesize as much as possible from the DeFi landscape, actually, and the TradFi landscape as we can into a single venue, where we know a bunch of stuff has worked traditionally, tried and true. Centralized order books, deep liquidity, right? Active market makers, right? That's all great for price discovery, for liquidity, for interactions. But we've also discovered that there's a lot to unlock on the DeFi side, that DeFi itself is a great place to innovate and iterate on financial protocols. But we've seen a lack of readoption of DeFi back into traditional venues. And we think that's a big miss. And so that's something that we're trying to push very heavily on, right? Things like, for example, liquidity provision on automated market makers in DeFi. That is a massive unlock of liquidity for retail and potentially an opportunity for yield for retail that doesn't exist in traditional platforms. There's no good place to run automated strategies unless you run a bunch of complicated infrastructure or are willing to pay existing, like tons of mental bandwidth in order to try to capture some of that yield in traditional venues. So that's something we're actually very excited to be rolling out over the next coming months and continuing to push on our algorithmic strategy executions into continued execution over time. Other things like order routing across different markets. That's a great innovation that DeFi's achieved that massively increases capital efficiency for all these tail-end tokens. That's something we're going to bring to Cube very shortly. Here it'll be under a new name, implied matching. The end idea there is there's implied order book that exists between all of these markets in a sense, and you can read more about that once we release the papers there. But in general, the philosophy is there's a bunch of stuff that works in TradFi. There's a bunch of new stuff that people are trying and are proving out in DeFi, and we want to combine both of those. So right now, the two things that we are highlighting, one I already touched on, the algorithmic trading. So that's a very nascent form that's released to everybody right now, and we'll be rolling out more features on that relatively shortly. The other big one is this thing that we're calling bundles. And the idea there is that, so you might want to bet on the basket of projects and not necessarily just a single one. And you want a way to do that at scale, over time, leveraged and balanced between the different asset groups. And for us, that's where bundles lives, and that's where it'll continue to evolve.